Latin America has undergone many internal changes in the last century, particularly regarding its development with the concept nationalism and a new type of colonialism from the U.S. The countries and their transformation was due in large part to revolutionary sentiments, initiated by the Mexican Revolution and economic effects of World War I. A glance at these two important events will be provided and analyzed in order to understand the situations that led Latin American countries assert their identity. Historical context. By definition, the concept of nationalism encompasses a number of factors that were not defined until the late 19th century. The emergence of the idea that members of a nation will seek self-determination and band together in the name of a common language or ethnicity created an imagined community that could unify the people. Latin America is unlike any other region in the world in terms of its relationship to nationalism. One simply has to compare it to Europe in terms of the cultural variations that are typically associated with national identities, whereas in Europe, almost every state has a different language, as well as cultural traditions. Latin America is largely homogeneous in those aspects. This distinction draws attention to the fact that movement towards self-determination was largely influenced by political and economic factors. The beginning of the 20th century was marked by long-awaited national independence from the majority of Latin American countries. This independence, however, was only on the surface due to the emergence of harsh authoritarian rule and the heavy hand of influence from the United States. Under colonial rule during the 18th and 19th centuries, Latin America was not exposed to democracy. At the start of the 20th century, not much had changed. One of the most notable attempts to escape this pattern of foreign intervention was the Mexican Revolution of 1910. The path to independence for Mexico began later than it did for the rest of Latin America. However, its effects would be felt by the rest of the region for years to come. The 20th century began with Mexico under the rule of military leader Porfirio Diaz, whose term had popular support, although there was a strong elitist dominance and economic ties to foreign companies, mainly with the U.S., which inspired nationalists to band together in the name of anti-Americanism. In 1900, approximately 77% of the Mexican population lived in rural areas. Initially, Diaz was able to maintain support due to his promises to improve the lives of the masses. Even with relative prosperity under Diaz's moderate dictatorship, there was a growing discontent at first from the non-favored military elites and later from peasant workers. This period became the first modern social revolution of the 20th century. It began as a political dispute in 1910, but gradually evolved into a demand for a deeper social transformation. The events that unfolded in Mexico between 1910 and 1920 were a result of deep-rooted social and economic issues. Initially, Diaz used fear tactics to keep revolutionaries at bay, but this strategy was not viable in the long run, especially with the lack of national hegemony to encourage popular support for the government. The revolution provided impetus for change in the social structure and created a type of national ideology that united the masses. The Mexican Revolution provided an inspiration of empowered nationalism for the rest of Latin America, like never before seen. From rural workers to urbanities, the call for just elections and constitutional became ever stronger and brought unifying national sentiment across ethnic and class lines. World War I. Latin America did not play a major or even a minor role in World War I, but the effects that this event had on the nations of this reign cannot be denied. The most significant impact was on the economy, which prior to the war was largely dependent on the export of food and raw materials such as oil, gold, and copper to Europe. Once war broke out in 1914, there was a clear shift in the world economy, one that left Latin America bearing the brunt of the economic loss at the beginning of the conflict. This wrought more problems for the reign as it became increasingly reliant on Europe and the U.S. for loans. This rising dependency aggravated both labor workers and educated elites, creating a strong foundation for cultural nationalism. Conservatives united with the left-wing groups in denouncing the actions of interventionists, most notably the U.S., for increasing economic and political turmoil. Of particular import is economic nationalism, which after World War I took an unfortunate turn due to short-term relief policies that favored immediate interests instead of economic independence. The problems arising from this period limited the success and momentum of nationalistic movements at the time, though they did not completely stop the drift away of being labeled a sub-civilization within Western civilization. The atmosphere in Latin America after the Mexican Revolution and the First World War was one of the amplified nationalism. Standing their ground against interference from foreign intervention provided the people of the reign with a unifying goal. Although Latin America has attempted to get out from under the thumb of the Western powers, the developments in international policies and the world economy continues to link them.